Hello. You may be wondering who I am, and if this is a video that will be shown to the whole school, then a lot of you will probably be thinking, who is that very strange man up there on the screen? Um, but I did actually used to teach at Putney High, and Mr. Barton asked me for a bit of a favour if I talk about my not favourite book, but a book I've read that I liked for World Book Day. Sorry that I haven't shaved, a bit scruffy. And yeah, so if any of you remember me, shout out to you. And hope you're all flourishing and see you again soon at some point. And also shout out to Jag, Pete Coulson, Kate Jeffrey, MLA, Mob, all kinds of people like that. But yeah, to cut to the chase, really, I'm not gonna be able to match Dr. Meller translating Don Quixote backwards into an elvish haiku. And I'm not going to talk about any book which has is very convoluted or pretentious or particularly over elaborate. I'm just gonna talk about somebody who I think is a great storyteller. Always writes. All her novels are great. Hasn't actually written a novel for about 6 years, so hashtag writer's block. But she's very accessible and quite rightly on the A-level syllabus now, I believe, one of her Victorian bodice-ripping, lesbian, picaresque, melodrama, crime, thriller, Oliver Twist-esque romps. And that is Sarah Waters. So I'm going to talk about the last one of hers that I read, which is probably the last decent book that I read, to be honest. It's called The Paying Guests. So just a little bit about Sarah Waters first. She's a really fantastic storyteller, just nuts and bolts storyteller. Old-fashioned storyteller in that way. So she writes page turners, and her language isn't showy, and everything is just served to further the plot, the character, and the setting. And she's occasionally structurally experimental. So there's a book of hers called The Night Watch, which she does tell backwards, which is a very interesting strategy. But usually she's pretty conventional in that sense. And she does weave issues in, but not in a sort of sanctimonious or overbearing way. Often there's a mystery involved, which sort of takes centre stage. And there's often a big twist at some point, which, yeah. So other things about just about her general writing style, her writing ability. She's an absolute master of show not tell. So something all you guys should do in your CIE English language. But you know, she really brings alive period. So all her books are period pieces. Either the Victorian era or Second World War, or this particular one, The Paying Guests, it's 1922. So she really brings alive a period in so many different brilliant ways. I don't know if any of you watched the latest Tarantino, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but not saying that's a flawless film, but by any stretch of the imagination. But one thing it does well is bring alive the period through little details, through period details, absolutely impeccable period details. The TV show Mad Men was also very good at that. But yeah, period details, everyday events, everyday routine, sensory imagery, what it's like in a domestic sphere as well as in the city, and as well as sort of maybe in the country at large. She really captures the mood and the feel of an epoch, and particularly of an epoch that is changing. One era going into another one. So the settings are very, very evocative, and often the settings mirror the characters in little clever ways. So just little aspects of the characters' emotions, of their personalities, is sort of reflected in the furniture and little objects, and the setting, and even the atmosphere of a city. Post-war, if it's ashen and grey, and maybe there'll be a particular person who as well is dealing with the disappointment, disillusionment, despair, and they'll kind of look like the setting. So that's really great. She also foreshadows with using objects, and a little key object will prove crucial later. So that's very, very clever as well. The characters are fantastic, really, really well delineated, really credible. What's done very well, again, like some of these sort of Netflix shows and so on, is the attention to detail with the clothes they wear. That also helps bring alive the period, obviously. The way they talk, their idiolect, that can also reflect their social class. And their idiosyncratic mannerisms. So that's also very good. So Sarah Waters, themes-wise, deals a lot with just the sort of, as I said, but changing of eras, and disparities in social class. But very, very particular is gender and sexuality, and characters dealing with insecurities, sins, secrets, neuroses, but absolutely preeminent in all our novels, I think, are very strong female characters finding their places and identities and voices, finding a sense of belonging in a socially unjust and intolerant, often priggish and patriarchal world. And often her novels have this sort of, usually, always actually, lesbian, really intense passion and really colourful sort of underworld, and then this sort of quite staid and sort of sedate society on top of it. And this is what this particular book, The Paying Guests, is principally about. So it's set in 1922. I've actually got the blurb here, but in a hushed South London villa, where life is about to be transformed as genteel widow Mrs. Ray and her discontented daughter Frances are obliged to take in lodgers. So basically, obviously, post-war, we're looking 4 years after the war, and the male population of Britain has been decimated. And so the city is really very empty of men, and the women have been left bereft. So they've got to find a way of carrying on. And so they're mourning, but at the same time, they have to find a way of getting the money to keep going. And one way of doing that is to open your house up as a B&B, which is what Mrs. Ray and her daughter do in this novel. And you have something very, very interesting, which is very interesting throughout the whole book, which is Mrs. Ray, the mother, is a very conventional woman and sort of stays at home and looks after the house and thinks that that's her duty. And she's just kind of mourning her dead husband and really going about her very mundane business, really. She doesn't have any aspirations, and doesn't think there's a world outside, and doesn't really think there's a place for women to be emancipated, really. But her daughter is rather restless. She's rather more, she's not very happy with the situation, and she's kind of more, she kind of wants to rebel a little bit. Anyway, you have this very interesting thing running through the whole novel, where women are obviously independent in a sense because they have to take over these roles of the men in society. So they have had independence and liberation sort of forced upon them in a way due to what's happened in the war. But at the same time, they're still expected to be subservient and to stay at home and to perform the sort of domestic role. So this girl, this daughter who is stuck at home, and she's from this kind of a lower middle class family, then into their house, the first lodgers, the paying guests of the title of the novel, are Lillian and Leonard Barber, who are a modern young couple of the Clark class. So they're sort of upper middle class. There's a social climbing and sort of nouveau riche in a sense. And they bring with them gramophone music, colour, fun, glamour, sex appeal, excitement, a little bit of recklessness, and dangerous desires. And so obviously this girl, Frances, stuck in this kind of very monotonous, boring kind of life, is going to be very tempted. And being a Sarah Waters novel, she's obviously going to be tempted by the wife of this Clark class. And Sarah Waters really builds this taboo, dangerous affair in a really addictive, really compelling, tantalising manner through the way they look at each other, touch each other, little signs here and there. Absolutely great stuff. And you have some great juxtapositions of their sort of passion, their sort of their clandestine passion, but in this very sort of drab, dreary, grey domestic setting. So that's really, 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 really brilliant as well. And then then Sarah Waters builds the world, builds the characters, builds the relationship very, very, very slowly, taking her time, never boring, always completely immersive. Then about halfway through, there is an incident, an event of spontaneous violence, which has cataclysmic repercussions. I won't tell you what it is, but so I'm not going to spoil it, but that happens. And so it then obviously this world has been kind of disrupted, and secrets start to kind of will spill out, or at least the insecurities are probed and scratched, and obviously the characters who have committed this event, this action, feel guilty. And it then becomes about how they can deal with this guilt, and are they going to manage to suppress it? And of course, being British, they're probably not going to be very good at actually no, sorry, opposite. If you're British, you are very good at withholding your emotion. But anyway, are they eventually going to crack? Because one of them in particular is a good person, is an innocent person. So, what does an innocent person do when they are racked with guilt? Are they going to start showing the signs? And we have a court case and all kinds of other... And the plot builds momentum, and there's twists, many, many more twists build up. And I've always loved novels which deal with an innocent person who's swept up in a crime that they didn't want to commit, and they're kind of forced into doing it, and then how they deal with it, really, and the psychological ramification to that, and psychological falling apart, and that's it. That's it in a nutshell, really. And obviously, because we're moving from... It's now 1922, as I said. And so Britain is kind of catching up with America, really. And so we're moving from this era of the staid, the genteel post-war. Everybody wants to be quiet, trying to get back to normal, rebuild the society. And these... but there's certain people like these lodgers, Mr and Mrs Barber, who are into the jazz, and we're getting some hedonism and the flappers and all of that cool stuff. And so we've got a clash of eras as well. So absolutely great, absolute ripper. And read Sarah Waters, read all of hers. She's one of the best. As I say, hasn't written one for a long time, but she's written about 4 or 5 or 6. And she can really do. She's got a great range, I think. Ghost stories, and yeah, Victoriana, comings of age, Bildungsromans, yeah, crime, people wrongfully imprisoned. I think that's one of them as well. Madness, mental asylums. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff anyway. So it's really great stuff. Read it for World Book Day. Have a great day, Miss Putters. Hope to see you again some point. Shout out to anyone I taught, as I say. Hope you're doing great. Probably doing A levels by now. Sure you're gonna get straight A's with this illustrious teaching team. Anyway, all the best, and yeah, take it easy.